In this video, I want to talk about 5 terrible myths that I believe we really need to avoid when it comes to self-defense. Stick around. I don't want to come across as a know-it-all in this field. I only want to share my experience, and I only want to share things that I have come to believe to be absolute truth in this area. Friends, in all humility, I want to say there are a lot of bogus ideas that we can adopt when it comes to the study of self-defense and martial arts. And there are a lot of lies that we can tell ourselves to make ourselves feel better and more reassured. I'm only going to include 5 in this video, but there is a longer list for sure. Myth number 1, size and physicality don't matter. It absolutely matters, man. This is not a kung fu movie. This is not the movies. Yes, there are times when the smaller person will prevail. It happens. It happens plenty of times, but we can't write a doctrine over that. We can't fool ourselves by always saying the bigger they are, the harder they fall. I get that statement. But I'm gonna tell you what, sometimes the bigger they are, the harder we fall. All you have to do to know that what I'm saying is true is get you some larger opponents and get in there and grapple with them and spar. You'll find out that it does matter. And out here on the streets, when a lot of things happen unexpected, it matters, especially then. You see these videos where you get a big, gigantic man. Sometimes it might take 4 or 5 cops just to subdue this guy. Listen, size does matter. It does matter. It doesn't mean that you won't prevail. It just matters. And I said size and physicality, and what I mean by physicality is someone being strong, someone having the ability to pick you up and slam you. Physicality, somebody who's physically in shape. Size and physicality does matter, and there is no magic formula to help us escape that. There are weight classes for a reason, which leads to my second myth. And that is the people who fight in sports combat are not as lethal as these guys that only train in self-defense. I want to tell you why that is a myth. You have to understand something. These MMA fighters, all of these professional athletes, they're only bound by rules in their arena, but that doesn't stop them from using the same lethal tactics in the street that a lot of the self-defense guys talk about. Remember, UFC fighters can eye gouge too when they're not in the octagon. They can kick in the groin when they're not in the octagon. They can do all the same stuff that people who just train in self-defense can do. You may or may not be familiar with this individual to the left. I'll put his name at the bottom of the screen because I can't pronounce it, but he is an MMA fighter who challenged several different traditional martial arts masters, traditional Wing Chun. He challenged them, and they could not handle what he brought to the table. He pretty much overwhelmed every one of his opponents. And imagine if he too was fighting dirty, doing throat shots, eye gouging, and all the rest. I'll try to put some of these video clips in the description for you to go back and watch, but it's just one of many examples of reality. And you got to remember, these trained fighters are actually getting in there and fighting. They're actually feeling the force of full contact fighting all the time. There is a lot of unrealistic stuff out in the self-defense training world. You've got these instructors that have these cooperative training partners that are not moving. They throw one punch, they stand still, they don't move. I'm not against practicing form. I'm just saying that we see these guys who are doing these self-defense demonstrations, they look very lethal, and then we say, well, that's totally different from the sports world. Just remember something, that sports athletes and athletic people can do the same dirty stuff that anybody else can do on the street. Put any of these guys that you believe to be the most dangerous self-defense instructor in the world against an MMA fighter out in the street, and I will tell you, if that MMA fighter is worth anything, the instructor who doesn't fight full contact on a regular is in for a wild ride. I said all that to say this: if you're training in traditional martial arts and lethal self-defense tactics, it would do you some good to just incorporate the same kind of training that people do in MMA. You need to know how to grapple, how to wrestle, how to box. All of these things matter. Don't just avoid those things on account of saying, well, self-defense, lethal stuff is different. No, we need it all. Myth number 3, just go for the eyes, go for the throat. Well, yeah, those are some pretty sensitive areas, and if you can successfully make a connection there, you may do well, but don't think it's always going to work. You might not hit on the exact spot on the throat that causes the assailant to collapse. You may miss in your attempt to eye gouge, and then by that time, he's hoisted you up over his head. Those moves are available to us, but don't just buy into the idea that that's all you need to do, or that you just need to hit some pressure point. Those pressure points are there, train to hit them, train to make a connection, but don't always think you're going to be successful with that. You hope to be successful, but be humble and be open to the fact that you might miss and you might be in deeper waters than you ever thought you'd be in. Myth number 4 is that martial arts training is all you need. There are people all over the world who believe that there's some kind of mystical magic formula to martial arts. There's a lot of people who believe that if they can just learn a few good moves, then they're going to be successful. And a lot of people will depend on martial arts who are not physically in shape, who don't have good cardio, who are not physically strong, who don't have good endurance. They're relying completely and totally on martial arts in and of themselves, when if you don't have physicality and toughness and training and endurance and cardio to go with it, it's not going to help you that much. There's a lot of people who believed that, they were going to be successful, and they relied on a few moves and ended up getting trashed by some wild, savage person with a lot of killer instinct who didn't even really know much. So yes, the study of martial arts is definitely an important thing. Different styles, striking, grappling, wrestling. It's important to be well-rounded. Study the arts, but know without developing some physicality, some strength, and all these other attributes that are needed to go with it, the killer instinct that needs to go along with it. The arts in and of themselves are not going to help you if you neglect all of those other things. Because in the real world, you gotta be explosive. Myth number 5, and probably the worst one, is all I need is a gun. Look, I'm an absolute advocate for carrying a firearm, and I do believe a firearm is the ultimate equalizer if you know how to use it. The problem is there's a lot of people who have overestimated their abilities to use it, and they have overestimated their own sense of confidence that they believe they will have in those moments. One of the reasons why I train with knives in particular is because the firearm may not be successful in every situation. That person may close the distance. Then what? Things may not go the way we expect. We may empty our magazine and be left with nothing if the situation is bad enough. They may get to us before we can successfully fire our weapon. I think this idea that all we need is a gun is one of the biggest myths that people have fallen for. I see it in the comments section in YouTube, and I understand where they're coming from, but we really need to abandon that mindset. In conclusion, the real world is ugly, it's fast, it's sloppy, it's unpredictable, and the only thing we can do is train to be as prepared as possible. But the last thing we need to do is go in with these unrealistic expectations of what we think we're going to be in that moment. And that's why it's so important, if we can, to stay out of situations. But a lot of people have a inflated sense of confidence about their own combative abilities, and that can be a very dangerous thing. I think it's best to train, stay hard, stay humble, and just know how unpredictable life is. Thanks for watching. Take care.